So what do you see the key challenges then over the next sort of 1 to 2 years for developers who are sort of trying to develop data center projects?
Power. The P word, power. It's all about power. Getting access to power, getting access to grids, getting access to renewable sources of power, navigating all those constraints. That's by far the biggest challenge.
Welcome to the Connectology podcast. I'm Hugh Taylor, CEO here at Road Knight Taylor, and in these episodes, our grid connection specialists, the Connectologists, dive into the evolving grid connections landscape, often taking expert guests with them in order to discover, generate, and share insights that might just help you and maybe even industry as a whole to connect projects faster, at lower risk, and at lower cost.
Hello and welcome to another podcast from Road Knight Taylor. I'm Pete Aston and I am joined today by Alan Pritchard from FarrPoint. Alan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So it feels like a while since I've done a podcast. We had a bit of a break over the summer, but it's great to sort of kick off the autumn season with yourself, Alan. And we just had a great lunch talking about everything that we're going to talk about now, which is all things data centers.
Indeed, yeah.
So can you just give us a bit of a background to yourself and sort of the work that you've been involved with in the past, and then into FarrPoint as well?
Yep. So yeah, I'm Alan Pritchard. Work for FarrPoint, as you said, Pete. So I've been in telecoms and networking and data centers for a long time, as my hairline would show. But yeah, data centers are not new, so they've been around as long as IT's been around. So I've been involved in IT and telecoms, working for telcos in the UK, Australia, New Zealand. So I've kind of been around the block a bit in terms of telecoms market. And FarrPoint are a kind of specialist consultancy organisation to providing independent technology consulting advice, particularly in connectivity and digital infrastructure. And of late, certainly within the last 6 to 12 months, data centers have been certainly one of our most popular lines of inquiry from the general marketplace.
Yeah. So this is more of an aside, I guess, to the main topic, which is going to be about data centers. But in terms of that connectivity piece, we work with a lot of clients who are connecting energy projects or connecting data centers and whatever. So you advise on connectivity?
Absolutely.
Bringing in fibre?
We don't sell products or services, so we absolutely provide independent advice to those who have a connectivity challenge. They need fibre, they need mobile, they need microwave, they need something to connect a community, an asset, a town, whatever it may be, and we will go to market for those organisations on their behalf if necessary, but certainly price up and do commercial analysis.
There we go. If any of our listeners want some advice on sort of connectivity,
absolutely,
data side of them, come go to FarrPoint.
Absolutely,
Alan and Co. So let's dig into our topic, which is data centers. Like you've said, it's a really popular thing to be looking at the moment for lots of developers looking in it. But let's go back to basics. Can you just explain what is a data center?
Yeah, absolutely. So data centers are not new, even though they are very popular at the moment and are certainly appearing in popular news outlets, whereas typically you wouldn't have heard of them before. They've been in the background. Data centers have been around as long as we've had IT systems. So banks have had data centers for years. There's just big grey boxes, anonymous on the edge of towns and cities. No one really knew what they did. Why are they popular now is because of the growth, particularly in cloud services. Everyone deals with the cloud. Our smartphones are all connected to the cloud. Without data centers, none of the cloud works because the cloud is effectively it is data centers. And in terms of the sizes of them, the kind of same as almost like t-shirts, small, medium, and large, and sometimes extra large. If you're Google or Meta or Facebook or someone. But yeah, the hyperscalers, they operate at the top end of the market. So those are the big data centers, typically hundreds of megawatts, if not beyond, hundreds, up to a gigawatt in some cases. And those are the large, big tech companies that everyone's heard of. Your Microsofts, your Googles, your Facebooks, etc. Then we've kind of got the kind of mid-tier market that deals in the kind of tens of megawatts, from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 upwards. And those are kind of the majority of the traditional markets in data centers across the globe, before the hyperscalers kind of came into being. And then we've kind of got the small kind of edge data centers, like of 1 and 2 megawatts. So those are the kind of tiering systems of they're basically big metal boxes full of IT, really, really expensive IT hardware.
So from an external perspective, they'll look like a sort of distribution warehouse.
They'll look like an Amazon warehouse without the Amazon logo on the side. They're typically debranded because people do not want to advertise their existence because they are seen as a critical asset.
Yeah.
There's a lot of expensive, very sensitive equipment and information in them.
Am I right in thinking the government fairly recently branded them as a critical national infrastructure asset, like an electricity substation might be?
And they've arguably always been a critical national, infrastructure asset. A bank who had a data center that you did your banking with, that's pretty important to you, and all that's banking customers. It's just they weren't a kind of unofficial critical national infrastructure asset.
So we've got the big metal box.
Big metal box.
What's inside the big metal box that makes the data center?
Lots of servers and storage equipment. So whatever you have in your laptop or your desktop, if you're still running a desktop, for those that like desktops, some of us still do. But anything that looks like a laptop, basically stuffed to the rafters, full of very expensive IT hardware. Servers, which are basically very, very big versions of laptops.
So there's and these are sort of in racks.
Rows and rows and rows and rows and rows. So it'll be thousands of servers in one of these data centers, all computing, gathering data, churning through data, storing data, retrieving data, sending it to your phone, my phone, everyone's phones. And
cooling, I assume, because they produce a lot of heat, I guess there's a lot of cooling systems.
Yeah, the majority of the energy involved in running a server or a laptop gets warm when you use it, gets generated as heat. So all the energy that it takes to supply one of these things actually gets dumped as heat, so they get very hot very quickly. It's analogous to you sitting on your laptop on your lap and on the sofa at night, and if something's really busy, your lap gets warm. In terms of what the laptop's doing, it's exactly the same with a server. Some servers are now more energy than like a one bar electric fire was the old way of using kind of an analogy. A 1 kilowatt fire, like a 1 bar electric fire. Some servers are like 5, 10, 15, 20 times that size of energy consumption. So that's a lot of energy, that's a lot of heat that's got to be got rid of. And if it doesn't got rid of, basically it melts.
Yeah. And we're going to come on and talk about a bit later about the sort of considerations of data center location. But I guess some of the other components into a data center are the connectivity,
energy,
electric, but yeah, maybe we'll touch on that a bit later, because obviously that's really crucial to thinking about the rollout of data centers. But can you just talk us through like some of the historic rollout of data centers across the country?
So I think it's probably useful to kind of give a perspective in terms of the kind of UK's data center market and where it sits in Europe and where it sits globally, and where data centers in the UK are found, or majority are found, even though they're quite anonymous boxes, big metal boxes. So there are about 500 approximate data center sites in the UK, vast majority around London. Vast majority, 80% plus of the data centers in the UK of these 500 approximately are in the London area, particularly in West London, which is why there's quite a high demand for energy in West London. But so that sounds like a big number, 500. The USA's got 4,000.
Wow.
And actually the UK's number 2 in the world, so we've got 500. USA's number 1's got 4,000, so there's a big gap between number 1 and number 2. And then the rest of the world market's about 10,000 data centers. So you can see that US is pretty much the majority of the data center market globally, and the UK is kind of number 2. And of that, the capacity in the UK, London is the majority of that capacity. It's about 1.1, 1.2 gigawatts of energy at the moment operationally. And the reason why it's in London is just the fact of that's where historically the demand was. Financial services were there historically and still are. And so data centers kind of grew from that base, and they tend to congregate together like many markets do.
Yeah, and safety in numbers.
Safety in numbers, sheep, the herd instinct kicks in.
Can you tell us a little bit about latency, sort of comms network latency, and the impact that sort of historically had on location, and maybe the impact that currently has? Yeah,
so traditional IT applications running in data center, like banking is a good one because we've had electronic banking for a long time. Financial transactions are very time sensitive, and if you're trading especially, but even if you're not trading, so that the time taken to send data, have it processed and send it back is really, really critical. Now it takes time to send data down a cable. It travels at approximately the speed of light, so that's quite fast. But the volume of the transaction and the importance of it, the value of the transaction means that sometimes these very, very small delays, when they're magnified up through thousands or hundreds of thousands of transactions, are significantly, they mean money.
Yeah.
So that has meant that data centers were located relatively close to where the big peak demand was, so there was very, very little.
So the financial market's been located in the middle of London.
Yep.
Hence data centers.
Docklands.
Hence data centers being very close to
London. Yeah, West London, particularly, but Docklands as well. So that's why that historic market grew there, and it has expanded from that point.
Yeah, and am I right in thinking that there's a sort of the transatlantic fibre cable comes in sort of from the west and in through West London? And what sort of impact has that had on location historically?
So that cable, or those subsea cables, are really important to data centers. So terrestrial cable is very important to where your demand is, but data centers have to connect to other data centers. And traditionally, there's a global market for data centers. So if you have a data center in London or South Wales, you'll be talking to data centers in Virginia, in the US, or in Amsterdam, or in Paris, or in Frankfurt. So those subsea cables, and because latency can be can be very important for certain types of transactions, the straight line distance on a subsea cable, if you're at the end of that straight line cable, that means you've got a bit of an edge in terms of latency. So you wouldn't put a data center, for example, I don't know, in the south of Spain. If you were trying to transact with someone in London, you'd want that cable to be as close as possible to London.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you for listening so far. If insights like these are valuable in your work, then feel free to subscribe and stay current as Britain's connections landscape continues to evolve. Now, back to the Connectologists.
So, can you sort of tell us a little bit also about the experience in Ireland, which obviously is not GB, but obviously very, very close market to GB, and that they, from what I understand, had a very strong incentives for building data centres.
They did,
that drove certain behaviours.
Yeah. So the Irish government had a policy. I think they still have a policy. It's a kind of lower tax regime. So they attracted a lot of US tech companies, and also pharmaceuticals as well, but particularly tech. So in Dublin Bay, a lot of tech companies arrived, and they brought their data centres with them. So there's a large part of the data center capacity in Western Europe is located in Dublin Bay. At one point, if you were consuming Netflix in the UK, it's probably coming from Dublin.
Right. Okay.
But it's since changed. So that tax regime generated interest in building the data centers in Dublin Bay, and it's become a very popular data center market to the extent that something like 60% of the energy consumed in Dublin is actually is consumed by data centers, which, Ireland's a relatively small country, so it can show you that kind of tax benefit or tax regime can sometimes, arguably go, to the extremes. And I think there's now a moratorium on new data center capacity in Dublin just because of the energy problems that's caused.
That's very interesting. Yeah, and I guess it's worth bearing that in mind as we move on now to sort of think around the current interest in data centers. So we've sort of mentioned it already, but there's a lot of interest from lots of parties at the moment in data centers. So can you just sort of talk us through what's driving a lot of that interest?
I think there's kind of two ways of looking at it. There's a kind of organic growth. The cloud's getting bigger. We're consuming more services from the cloud, either in the workplace or at home. So the cloud is kind of organic growth. The cloud requires connectivity and it requires data centers. So that generates the requirement for more capacity. But what's kind of given a bit of a step change is artificial intelligence. Yeah. So the AI word, or two words rather, that's generated the majority of the kind of new popular demand for data centers. And that's because AI, as different to traditional cloud data centers, requires a lot more energy and a lot more IT hardware to do its thing. It's very, very intensive in terms of IT hardware, particularly the computational chips from NVIDIA and others that actually do the AI computations, either training or inference. So that energy requirement, that hardware requirement, has spurned and generated, the demand for more real estate hardware and more energy, because IT needs energy, lots of IT needs lots of energy, AI needs all of that, and so it's kind of a kind of self-perpetuating.
And so, so obviously AI is a global thing. So you'd expect somewhere like the UK to be getting into that. In terms of the sort of UK government, though, what are they doing to promote data centers?
UK government are trying to embark upon a kind of a stimulus. Maybe stimulus is the wrong word, but they're trying to encourage, AI. They want to be sovereign in AI. I mean, sovereign's like an interesting concept because many other countries don't want to be reliant on some of the big tech companies who have all the dollars in AI. So many countries around the world are looking to be sovereign in their own capability, and the UK is certainly no different to that. So UK government have announced some packages of stimulus, particularly AI growth zones. Growth zone number 1 is in Cullum, not far from where this has been recorded. That was announced in January, and there's another 2, I think, to be announced relatively soon somewhere else in the UK. And those will be to try and foster and generate demand and interest and capability and sovereign capacity for AI factories, effectively.
And so does that mean that if you are trying to build a data center, you can only build it within a AI growth zone? Or it's just like a focal point for...
I think a focal point's a good way of describing it. It's hoped that they will, effectively, if you build it, they will come. Others will come around, and an ecosystem of like-minded industries, digital industries, AI industries will be fostered, and they will collaborate around each other. So that's certainly the goal. I believe that those growth zones will achieve.
Yeah, and in terms of your own experience, then what you're seeing in terms of activity of your clients, are you seeing a marked sort of increase in conversations? And
certainly lots of conversations, and lots of conversations from folks we probably wouldn't have spoken to before. About what's the likelihood of us being able to have a data center in this location? Do we have connectivity? Do we have power? Do we have land? Asking those questions, and folks asking the question, well, I've got fibre in my house. BT have just dug fibre in, or whoever it is, Virgin Media have got fibre in my house. Does that mean I can have a data centre in my back garden? No, that's maybe an extreme example, but it's kind of some of the thought processes that go with data centres. And the reality is probably not. I'm not sure I would want a data centre in my back garden anyway. But that's certainly lots of conversations about people trying to understand, what it takes to have a data center. Where's it best to have one? Can we even have one? Do we have X? Do we have Y? Do we have Z? and what are those X, Y's and Z's?
Yeah, and that's interesting. Yeah, we in our work as Raylight Taylor are seeing a huge amount of interest in data centers as well from the power side, and we've already talked how power is vitally important. But in terms of the capacities we're dealing with, between us, we're dealing with many gigawatts worth of interest in data centers. So I know you've told me earlier, but could you tell everyone who's listening what the current installed capacity of data centers is in this country?
So I think I mentioned it earlier that London's about 80 to 90% of the UK data center market. It's 1.1, 1.2 operational gigawatts.
In London or
in London.
Yeah.
But that's, to be honest, that's the majority of the UK market. So that everything else added up, it'll be
1.5 gigawatts.
Yeah, it'll be 1.5 or something. Yeah, so 1.5 gigawatts. Let's call it 1.5 round numbers.
Yeah.
Is the UK's operational capacity. So if you want to build a 1 gigawatt campus at the bottom of your backyard, that's the size of the whole UK data center market. 70 to 80% of the current UK capacity. So that shows you the scale of some of these projects and the cost of them. 100 megawatt data center is about £1 billion. Now that gets you, what does that get you? It gets you the land, it gets you the power, which is good for you.
Yeah.
It gets you some fibre, which is good for ourselves. It gets you a building, and it gets you that building powered with generators, with cooling equipment, effectively enough to move into if you're, it's not got any furniture in it, you couldn't live in it. Yeah. And not that I'd want to live in a data centre anyway, but it gets you a shell that's kind of capable of doing something. It gets you no servers, it gets you no storage, it gets you no IT equipment, and that can be like 3 times the value again. Yeah. Because some of this IT hardware, particularly the AI chips, are really, really, really expensive. Really expensive. So yeah, that kind of puts it in perspective. So that's 100 megawatts is £1 billion.
Yeah.
A gigawatts is a wee bit more.
Yeah. So I mean that's phenomenal. I was really surprised when you told me there's only 1.2, 1.5 gigawatts of operational capacity, bearing in mind all the volume of capacity that we are looking at, and we'll only be looking at a fraction of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
So it does feel like there's something of a bubble.
Oh, I can't use the bubble word.
We can't use the bubble.
No, we're not allowed to use bubble words.
But
there is a bit of I think you're right though. There will be a kind of leveling off. There has to be. Yeah. And I think it's like any kind of funnel pipeline project. You start up with this, it goes to that, it goes to this, and then it kind of ends up as that.
Yeah, there'll be a huge amount of attrition.
Yeah.
And, some sites won't get planning permission.
Right.
Some will just not look attractive for other reasons. Some can't get power, or the power's too expensive, or fiber's too.
I think power is the kind of number one criteria because everyone's got land. If you've not got land, then you're not really having the conversation anyway. But power is the number one problem, the number one challenge, constraint, whatever you want to call it, for a data center, just because of the energy consumption.
You talked to me about a 3-legged stool.
Yes, I did.
Data centers.
Yeah, we're on 4 legs.
Oh, we're on 4 legs.
Yeah. Yeah, 3-legged stool is a useful analogy because the data center needs 3 critical things. There are lots of other critical things, but there are 3 super critical things. I mentioned land, so land's taken as a given. You need to have a plot of land that's big enough and capable enough, and folks want a data center on it, which is not necessarily the case for, some locals. But far more important than that is power. Can you get access to the grid, and can you get the power at the right price? And is it renewable sources? I mean, that's one of the UK government's key asks of AI growth zones, is that there has to be using renewable and green, given the kind of carbon neutrality and the targets that we have. Building data centers that just take gas generated energy or whatever they are, carbon generated energy is not seen as kind of desirable. So it has to be renewable sources of energy, ideally. And then the third leg of the stool, which is probably a kind of smaller leg of the stool, it's not a very good stool.
It's slightly lopsided.
Slightly lopsided stool is the connectivity.
Yeah.
Data centers need fiber from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 providers. The more providers, the better, because they run 24/7, 365 days of the year. They're connecting and moving information around constantly to other data centers, to the other data centers on the other side of the world, and they cannot stop. They do not stop. So resilience is critical for them.
And in terms of, we talked about location in the countries being sort of focused around London.
Yep.
From a sort of connectivity point of view, could you have a scheme located in Northern England or Scotland or Wales or whatever?
There's probably no reason, particularly for some use cases, particularly AI training, which doesn't need huge amounts of connectivity all the time because it's doing a lot of processing itself. It's kind of glowing red hot, computing all the things that need to be computed to train AI models. They typically go where the power is cheap.
Sure.
So there's examples of AI training data centers in Iceland and northern Sweden because the power's quite cheap.
Yeah, and cooling's a bit easier.
Yeah, you just kind of open the door almost. It's an extreme example, but free air cooling is certainly a lot cheaper when in a cooler climate.
Yeah, and I think you just raised a really interesting point around cost of power. So,
yes.
So obviously the three-legged stool is maybe around how you actually plug into the grid.
Yeah.
But once you're plugged in, the UK has pretty high energy costs.
It does. We all know that.
Yeah.
As domestic consumers, that we have high energy costs. Data centers' biggest operational cost is energy. Once it's built, it just consumes energy. It consumes energy to run servers. It consumes energy to cool the servers. Yeah. It consumes energy just doing what it does. So power costs in the UK don't favour data centres. If it was my money...
And yet there's a lot of interest.
Exactly. But I think it's this kind of sovereignty thing. So sovereignty comes at a premium.
Okay.
If you want to be sovereign in something, inevitably I'm not saying the cost is irrelevant because it's always relevant, but if you want to build a sovereign capability in anything, sometimes it does come at a premium because you have to overcome those barriers.
Yeah. And time scale wise, lots of sort of clients I talk to are saying, if they haven't built these AI data centers, by 2030 or the early 2030s, that's it. That you sort of missed the boat, sort of thing. But is that true, or is there a bit of a longer tail?
I mean, I don't think they've necessarily missed the boat, but there is a bit of a. I'm not going to use the bubble word. We agreed we're not going to use the bubble word.
We're not going to mention the B word.
Yeah, don't mention the B word. There will be a flattening off, but demand will keep going. It's just it's this, I guess, the gradient of the curve.
Yeah.
How many gigawatt campuses do you need in the UK? How many do you need in Europe? How many do you need in the globe? But the tech will move on. They will enhance. They will develop. So I don't think it will be a build it once and that's it. It will never happen again. It will continue to be built out. I think it's just the argument over how much.
And at some point we'll get quantum computing. Not that I understand what quantum computing is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Don't ask me what that is either.
So what do you see the key challenges then over the next sort of 1 to 2 years for developers who are sort of trying to develop data center projects?
Power. The P word, power. It's all about power. Getting access to power, getting access to grids, getting access to renewable sources of power, navigating all those constraints. That's by far the biggest challenge. And I think that's a global challenge. It's not particularly a UK challenge. I mean, global markets in data centers are pretty much seeing the same challenge. It's all about power.
And what do you think about public opinion as well? It's, obviously you said sort of right at the beginning, data centers have sort of been hidden.
Yes.
but now perhaps if we're moving to gigawatt scale campuses, maybe you can't really hide them.
You can't really hide them.
So have you got any sort of feeling about that sort of public opinion side?
I think the jury's probably out on whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, and it's probably both in terms of your perspective, whether you're not in my backyard or yes, come to my backyard. There's a bit of both. What I would say is, having spoke to some developers, is that the cost of building a big data center project, a local community could really benefit substantially. And we're not talking about roads, we're talking about building campuses where, broadband, 4G, 5G, lots of stimulus can be added into an area because the cost of the project is so big.
So some infrastructure improvements to a community.
Yeah. So someone told me they would build a university campus. That because of the size and scale of these things, we could afford to build a university campus. And
what about the heat? So I've heard of some data centers trying to do something with the heat that they produce.
That is more common in mainland Europe than it is in the UK. But there are some projects being established where district heating, so the excess heat from a data center can be piped into houses, swimming pools, hospitals, public buildings. It's quite hard to do because the heat doesn't travel well, so it's got to be relatively close. And there are other projects where you can heat greenhouses and things like that, so you could build greenhouses on the side of data centers. These are all possible. Not as common in the UK because the UK doesn't have a history of district heating networks. We all tend to be heated on our own, but not impossible. And certainly some of the sustainability, metrics that are used to measure projects, if you can offer heat to people, that certainly would reduce a barrier to kind of take up.
Brilliant. Well, we've been waved at by the person.
In a good way or a bad way?
Abby's waving at me to say we've probably been talking long enough, Alan.
Okay.
I think it's fair. This has been brilliant. Any last things to say, things that we've missed that we should have said that we haven't?
I think we've covered a lot of ground, actually. I think the key takeaway for me is that data centers have been hidden for a long time. They're no longer being hidden. They're kind of in the press. They're not going away. And whilst people may not want them, there's some kind of argument that says, well, we all have smartphones. We all watch our TVs. Our TV content comes from data centers now rather than TV studios like this. So unfortunately, they're kind of fact of life, and it's trying to make the best of it.
Alan, it's been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. It's been really interesting for me and hope for listeners as well. And thank you everyone for listening or for watching, and hope you join us on our next podcast. But thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks for joining the Connectologists in this exploration. This knowledge sharing is made possible by the support of our clients. We thank them and hope it will help the whole of industry to connect society's critical infrastructure faster. If you found this useful, you're welcome to explore more free insights at roadnighttaylor.co.uk/Connectology, or click on the Insights tab at the top of our homepage. Thank you.